Facebook, how are we? Everyone that's watching on Facebook Live and YouTube tomorrow. We've got Jess Moore with us, an MMA fighter who is going to share his story and things like that, get into some of our hot topics and whatnot. We're going to get to recording in just 1 second, as soon as I find my recording software. Oh, you dirty, rotten... There we go. Okay. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Kinetic Chaos Podcast number 57. I am your host, Will, joined as always by my good friend Wes.
Right here I am.
He is across from me today because we are joined by another special guest, Mr. Jess Moore. He is an MMA fighter here in Washougal, and he is kind enough to join us and talk about kind of his career, the things that he's overcome, the triumphs, the adversity, all of those things. So we're going to get into a little interview with him, but first, as we always like to do, we've got a good thing that happened to us since the last time we broadcast. Wes, what do you have for us today?
We may be sharing the same good thing as what we did on Saturday. We went down to KXL News Radio 101 FM in Portland and talked with one of the producers there and got a tour of the place, and he kind of shared some insider tips and tricks of the broadcasting business with us. So very informative and very fun. And what was really cool is he wants to basically meet with us on a regular basis going forward. So.
Yeah, that was really cool, and you're exactly right. Kind of an offshoot of that was the technical type stuff that we went over and that I learned in terms of, cutting broadcasts and taking things and kind of packaging them in a different format, shorter format for folks to consume in the way they may like. They may not want to hear all 60 minutes of you and me blathering on a microphone, so maybe it's a 10-minute segment or something like that. So it was a great opportunity. Again, we thank Brandon Eisen so much for taking the time to meet with us. We were down there for 2.5 hours?
Yeah, close to 2.5.
It was incredible to get down there, see the thing that kind of surprised me, and I think maybe you to some degree, was that there's 4 radio stations right there in that one room. They had KXL, The Game,
Kink FM, 1019 was there.
Yeah, I had to get my soft voice.
Yeah, the easy listening. Yeah.
Exactly. We saw Jordan Kent down there, the ex Oregon Duck football player, basketball player, and current broadcaster for the Trailblazers, their pregame and halftime show and postgame, and he was actually on the game that day. So, no, that was incredible to get down there and just learn from the professionals, get to sit in the big boy chair. I felt like I was at the main table at Thanksgiving, kind of.
That's right, yeah.
Anyway, so Jess, you have something good that happened to you since, not the last time you were on a broadcast, but maybe in the last few days or so?
I'm just really blessed. I mean, my training's been going really great lately, and so I just feel like I'm just coming at a new level. So in that aspect, I just feel blessed with that.
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. Whatever our endeavors are in our careers, our personal life, and all that, to be blessed is an incredibly great thing, and to realize that you are thankful for all the awesome things that are going on in your life. So that's great to hear, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in just a little bit. But first, I'm not gonna jump into it, Wes, because you flamed me last night on KCP Kids on the live feed there, but. This good news story. We've got a father that befriended crashed my iPad. There you go. So this is what you get for broadcasting in the backyard, Jess. It says high production quality, right? Let's see. Hey, there we are. I'm looking at the live feed, and the brightness off Wes's head is incredible.
The side of the head, yeah.
It's like Sputnik. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. No, we've got a father that befriended his son's bully.
Yeah, so this is a father whose 8-year-old son was being bullied at school, and so he found out who the bully was, and contacted the kid's mom and said, "Hey, is it okay if I sit down with your son and talk to him and figure out why he's being a bully? Trying to talk things out." And so the mom agreed, and so I think he had an idea that they were kind of underprivileged family, and so he got permission to take the kid out to lunch.
Really?
And so he took this bully out, his son's bully, took him out to lunch and kind of talked to him, and through the course of talking to him, found out that they were actually homeless.
Oh, wow.
And so then he took them out clothes shopping and bought them like a whole new wardrobe.
No kidding.
So that's a pretty cool deal, talking about turning the tables of a bad situation where his son was getting picked on. And when he was talking with this kid, he asked him, why are you lashing out towards my son and others? And he said, well, because everybody picks on me because I always have dirty clothes and I'm not clean. And so people picked on him, so he in turn was picking on everybody else, kind of thing. So it was just like a vicious circle. So it was really cool of this guy to step up and go take him clothes shopping and that kind of stuff, and try to help his self-respect, his self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And to actually see how communication can actually work in terms of, rather than just coming down on the kid, lashing out as a parent, because we see that all kinds of times. When somebody picks on another, your kid or anything like that, your natural reaction is to go after them or something like that. But to actually have the wherewithal to say, hey, we're going to talk about this. We're going to see what the actual problem is. Because a lot of times, you're exactly right. There's a much bigger issue than what is presented to you in terms of the school or anything like that. That's a good thing, and we want to see maybe some other people out there that, we all deal with this on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter if you're an adult or if you're a kid, bullying happens all the time. In the workplace, families, all that kind of stuff. You ever dealt with anything like that, Jess?
Oh yeah, growing up smaller, of course, I always dealt with bullying. And, definitely been on the receiving end of it. And, like you said, even as you get older, it's sad that it's still apparent, that's for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people, that's what they seem to want to get their self-esteem from, is picking on others, and really it's usually just because they don't have the self-esteem themselves.
Right.
And so that's this is good news, and that's, again, we want to get these kind of great stories out there so that maybe somebody, a listener, a viewer, something like that, can help somebody else out. So, well, let's say, I will say it, Les, to hell with you. We're going to jump into the hot sheet. This is a running joke between Les and I, because I use the same stupid words over and over again. Even though we're 57 episodes into this, for some reason the old noggin up here can't think of anything different. So I get behind this mic quite a bit, though, so I don't know what the deal with that is. Our first one here is Saudi Arabia has said the killing of the journalist was a mistake. He was a Washington Post.
Yeah, he's a foreign national
Khashoggi,
who was, Jamal Khashoggi. He worked for the Washington Post kind of as a freelance writer. And he showed up at the consulate over in, I'm spacing on the country now. Turkey, thank you. I didn't write that down. And so while he was at the consulate in Turkey, 15 agents, undercover kind of special ops agents from Saudi Arabia came to the consulate. They've got them on security footage, these 15 guys going in, first off, this guy going in, and the 15 guys going in behind him, and then a while later, the 15 guys leave, but there's no sign of him, the journalist. So it was long suspected that he was murdered in there, and through a lot of diplomatic pressure, they finally got the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to admit to it, and they're trying to spin it now that it was an accident. But then the ridiculous, and then the ridiculous thing too is that they got one of the 15 Saudi agents that went in there on surveillance footage, and he had a bone saw.
Are you kidding me?
Because they dismembered him afterwards. So the fact that you try to play it off as an accident, well, if you're going in there to question him, why are you carrying a bone saw?
Right.
Yeah, so that's still the whole accident story is obviously a bunch of garbage. So.
And this is going to continue to blow up in Saudi Arabia's face. I can only imagine that we're probably going to have some kind of retribution, I would imagine, even though we're usually pretty close allies with them.
There's been several senators on both Republicans and Democrats that have come out and told Trump that he needs to basically cease relations with Saudi Arabia until this crown prince steps down, because it's with the monarchy kind of system over there. He runs the show. So these senators are saying until he's gone, until they replace their leadership over there, then we don't need to be dealing with these people.
Wow, now that is a huge deal, and that could be, I mean, what could happen, the ripple effect that could have on the world economy because of the amount of oil that they crank out of there. Even though we've stepped up our oil production here in the U.S., they're a huge part of that. So this is going to be something in the flashback follow-up that I'm sure we're going to continue to cover. So number 2 years, we've got a U.S. Army general that was shot in an ambush in Afghanistan. Luckily, he's alive, though.
Yeah, he made it out safely, or not safely, but alive. This is a brigadier general of the Army, was meeting with a police chief in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan, and one of the lower rung people on the chief's security detail was actually a Taliban sympathizer.
Really?
And so he turned on him once he obviously realized he had a high-ranking U.S. official, a general there meeting with the chief of police. This supposed security officer turned on him and opened fire. The police chief was killed along with another Afghani police official, and this general was shot but survived. And then the article mentioned that the general was wearing a sidearm. He had a pistol on him, so he drew and fired on this guy. I don't know if he hit him or not.
It didn't say that he hit him.
But it could have been a really bad situation, losing a general like that. So fortunately, he survived. But sadly, an Afghan police chief and one of his sidekicks lost their lives.
On this, one of those things where, for the armed forces dealing with these other militaries and things like that, you don't know what you're going to be dealing with. It's not like we're taking these guys and running them through our background checks and things of that nature. That makes it incredibly difficult. And I know from listening to guys like Jocko Willink, over in Afghanistan and Iraq and places like that, they worked hand in hand with the other government's forces, but you still, you always have that edge. You don't know when somebody's going to turn on you, or they've been purchased by the other government or something like that. So this number 3 here, this one makes me sick to my stomach.
Exactly.
Rae Carruth, the ex-NFL player who was convicted of conspiracy to murder charges, getting released from prison.
I still remember this trial like it was yesterday. This was back in '99, but I still remember this very well when this happened. So this, as you said, was Rae Carruth. He was a number 1 draft pick by the Carolina Panthers, and he was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder against his girlfriend and their unborn child that she was pregnant with. Basically the backstory of it was they had gone out to dinner together, and for some, obviously as part of the setup, they had driven separately. And after they left the restaurant, he was driving in front of her, and they got to a stop sign, and they both stopped, and I guess the light went green, and he stayed there to keep her from moving as a car pulled alongside and opened fire and shot and killed her. Actually, she wasn't killed right away. She went into a coma, and she passed away a few weeks later. But he was implicated in the conspiracy because they found through evidence that he was in on it, and he was obviously boxing her in, waiting for somebody else to come shoot her. So a really sad deal, and as you mentioned, he was released today. He was released this morning after serving 20 years, and that doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem right. So yeah, I mean, if you put a hit out on your girlfriend and your unborn child, and you only served 20 years, that doesn't seem right.
Do you remember that story, Justin?
I don't.
It was, you were probably, what year did you graduate? 05. Holy moly, I feel even older.
Yeah, we're old, yeah.
My goodness, because I remember, up in the wrestling room with you and stuff. But no, I remember exactly like you said. It was a huge deal, and I remember I used to listen to Jim Rome a lot back then, and I mean, he was all over that. But the thing that I find particularly disgusting is that Carruth is trying to paint himself as a victim in all of this, and he has taken no responsibility for his actions whatsoever. And because it's come up recently, I actually read an article, it was probably a few months back, about the child and wanting to be in the child's life and things like that.
Yeah, and I didn't mention that part. The child did survive. She was pregnant at the time, and she died. They had to do an emergency C-section to deliver the child, and due to the complications of the traumatic injury of the mother, he ended up being born with cerebral palsy. So he's severely disabled, and her mother, so his grandmother, has been raising him this whole time, and he still needs daily care because of his disability. And as you said, Rae Carruth now is coming out of prison and wants to act like nothing's happened. And he basically said he wants to raise his son, and that his grandma, it's not her place to raise his son. It's his job to raise his son. I'm like, dude, this is not.
That's ridiculous.
That doesn't fly.
But and he was writing articles or letters or something like that. Again, painting himself as a victim or just not taking responsibility for it, and that's obnoxious. It's your kid.
Yeah.
It's the mother of your kid. Why would you want to do that in the first place? You have an NFL career to flush it all down the toilet. What was the big problem? I don't remember what the impetus for him doing this was. Cause
he wanted her to have an abortion and she refused.
So now he wants to be in the kid's life.
Yeah, exactly. So he wanted her and the kid killed because of that, and now he wants to play dad after 20 years. So, yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredibly horrible. But again, like you said, 20 years does not seem, when we have people that, whether it's drugs or, they've done something to themselves, no one else, and they're in prison longer than somebody that has put a hit on somebody.
Yeah.
So, number 4 here, we've got a large group of Central American migrants that are in a gigantic caravan, basically, coming for the United States.
Started out in Central America, and they've made their way across the Mexican border, so they're kind of in the southern part of Mexico now, and the numbers are just estimates at this point, but they seem to be growing by the day. I checked a few days ago, and they talked about in the range of 1,000 people, and then a couple days, or like a day ago, it was like 5,000, and they said this morning the latest guesstimate is about 7,000 people.
What I heard too.
So it's getting bigger and bigger. They're picking up people as they head towards the border. And Mexico a few days ago had promised to help out and stop them, and they didn't do it. They're just letting them cruise on through. They're not putting up much of a fight to stop them. And so now they obviously are making their goal is to get to the U.S. border and declare asylum and try to get in. And now this is obviously being viewed as a national security issue, because if you've got a big chunk of 7,000 people flooding across the border all at once, that presents a huge problem. So President Trump has talked about possibly deploying the military down there to the border to prevent them from crossing. So it's and all this is a side note, kind of not necessarily funny, but kind of interesting timing. There's a hurricane bearing down on them, coming in from the Pacific, and it's basically going to cut right across the central part of Mexico, right where they're coming up. So, and it's a Category 4 hurricane. I
think it went to a 5.
Did it go? Yeah. So it's a big hurricane. So this is gonna, depending on how close they are, this could wipe a lot of these people out.
And the thing that I can't stand about it, leave the caravan alone, is that it's being politicized. Mm-hmm. Again, we've seen it weaponized to make an attack on the Democrats, and regardless of any of that, we need to deal with the problem. We don't need to name call. We don't need to. Any of that BS needs to go out the window. We need to solve the problem, because calling names, as we were talking about with bullying earlier, does not solve the problem. And I don't have the answer for it. None of us, I don't think, sitting at this table have the answer for it. But it's one of those things that we've got to just get away from that crap and actually deal with the issue at hand. So, well, number 5 in the hot sheet is one that we all like to talk about. We all like to think about, because it's a good daydream. You need to take your mind off something. This is something that's
What are you talking about, daydream? It's reality.
It is reality. I am going to win. We can split it. Let's pick the same number. We can split it. And that's that we've got 2 gigantic lottery jackpots. We got $620 million, I believe, for Powerball, and the rough estimates are $1.6 billion for Mega Millions, but I'll bet you by tomorrow night we're going to see $1.8 billion.
I'm guessing 1.8 was my guess.
That's my guess as well. And it's one of those, go ahead and tell us some more about it if you've got the notes on it there.
You basically summed it up. Just other things I wrote down, the good old odds there, and that is...
Yeah, I want to hear that.
Yeah, for Mega Millions, which is the $1.6 billion jackpot, the odds of winning that are 1 in 303 million.
Really?
And for Powerball, it's 620 million. Those odds currently stand at 1 in 292 million. The other interesting thing is this. Obviously, the jackpot has gotten this big because we haven't had a winner in a long time. They said, I read an article last night that due to now, obviously everybody's buying tickets. The bigger the jackpot gets, the more people buy tickets, and because there's such a large chunk of tickets being purchased, they are estimating that 75% of the number combinations will be sold. So therefore, we're 75%. There's a 75% likelihood that somebody's going to win.
I can only imagine. I can't believe that somebody doesn't actually put together some kind of, trust and go out and buy all these thinking tickets.
Yeah.
Or buy, because now if it's, 1 in 300 million, you got a pretty good shot at least hitting part of it and doubling your money maybe.
Right.
Something of that nature if there's 3 people that hit it. Because like I say, at 1.8 billion, all you got to do is hit 1 in 6, or I'm screwing my numbers up here. The Washougal math is. But no, like we said just before we hit record here, quick thing I want to ask both of you: what would be the first thing you would do? Not literally. You hit the numbers. What do you do?
Find a tax attorney.
That's the first thing you do. You don't puke. You don't do cartwheels, anything like that. I'm talking literally like you check the tickets, and then you
probably have a seat on the floor before I pass out.
Yeah. Exactly. Jess, what would be the first thing you would do?
Oh, I would freak out, man. I mean, there's so many ideas that go through your head, but just naturally, you're just gonna freak out.
Absolutely, and I think I would pass out. I'm pretty sure that I will. So if y'all don't hear from me tomorrow night, I do have an appointment tomorrow night. But if you don't hear from me around 8 o'clock after the drawing, there's a good chance I hit it. So, what would be the first thing you buy after the attorneys? After that, what would you buy?
I would say I'd dole out some stuff, some money to family.
We know
but
we're
in terms of
that
purchase,
kind of
I think first thing I would do would be to get a chunk of land and build a house.
Big house around here. Where would you go?
Yeah, I want acreage, so I would say at least 5 acres plus, but somewhere where we can get some acreage out of it. So
I dig that.
Yeah.
Jess?
I was thinking right around the same lines. I love it around here, but honestly, I'd probably just start cruising plane tickets and just get out of here for a little bit,
No, you're not in plane ticket land anymore, Jess.
you can buy a plane.
You're in private jet money.
Oh,
now.
You gotta stay humble.
There you go. There you go.
Now, I totally agree you got to stay humble, but you can stay humble on a private jet that is a 747 and you got all your friends in it while you're flying to Vegas.
I only have like 4 friends. No.
Oh, come on. I know you got more friends than that. Trust me, if you hit that bad boy, you're going to have a few more than 4.
I know. That's why you got to disappear for a little bit.
Yeah, that's the third question I had. Would you ghost yourself? If you hit it, would you totally ghost yourself?
I think I linked to it on our show notes. CNBC had a cool article about like the 6 things you should do. One of them is talking about getting a tax attorney, financial advisor if you're not savvy that way. The other one it talked about too is if you want to stay anonymous, to have your tax advisor set up an LLC to direct that money through an LLC so you can't be traced.
Here's my biggest. Actually, I want your take on that too.
I would be an elite level ghoster with that, but I would
elite level kids. That's a new one.
But I would just make sure all my debts, student loans, everything like that's just taken care of, and then just disappear for a little bit.
Yeah.
I love what I do for a job, so I don't think I would ever abandon that. I would still do that and work with people, but I would definitely hit ghost mode for a sec.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It would be a tough thing though, the LLC, and I can appreciate all that. Here's my issue. If I got that ticket, I am not taking the time or the chance that I'm going to lose that SOB. I am getting it out of my little 7 fingers, and I am getting it into the hands of the correct people. Because safe deposit box, nope, I'm not taking any chances. I am getting rid of that thing straight away, the next day. So Wednesday, plan on it. You won't hear from me for a while.
See, that's my greatest fear is I win, I freak out, I drop the ticket, my 2-year-old grabs it and shreds it.
Exactly.
See, that kind of thing. So
no, I'm right there with you. I would... to answer the question, what I would buy, I would probably, honestly, I've always thought about all the houses and stuff because I like to travel and things like that. I would probably go for Montana. I want to live here, but I would go to Flathead Lake in Montana and buy the lake and just, not the whole thing maybe, but no, I would love to do something like that. I've never been to Montana, but Flathead Lake is, it's, I guess, 50 feet deep, 100 feet, very, very deep, but the water is so clear you can see to the bottom. And it's always been something that is exciting to me to go up there on a vacation or something. So but you got to stay humble. After you got to set up in fact, I was talking to the kids because I really like the whole aspect of the daydreaming part of it. What would you do kind of thing. It's a fun little discussion, but I would set up a foundation and take care of kids and stuff like that, because that's the important part. You want to make sure that you're not going to use that money for stupid stuff. And yeah, you're going to have
Mayweather.
Right.
You can buy 800 cars with it, right?
Why not? No, but you want to see it because it's a karma thing. You do good for people, you get it, because money doesn't make you feel good. It solves some problems and makes things a little bit easier, but you're not getting any true happiness out of it. It still comes down to, like you said, working with people. I wouldn't quit doing this. Yep. That's for damn sure. And I would probably still be involved in real estate. I mean, if you truly love what you do, it's not a job. Whether it's a calling or whatever you want to say it is, it's just something that you don't want to stop doing it. I would just have probably a little bit better equipment, like KXL.
And a full-blown studio.
Oh, yeah. But it would have to be an outdoor studio
there
as
you
well.
go.
So,
yep.
Well, let's get into the fun part here. We're going to get to know Jess a little bit more. You ready for this? The grill?
I think so.
We actually have more lights we're going to bring on you just to give you a nice little tan here. So,
sweet, I need that.
Jess, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, who you are. You don't have to tell us your age, anything like that. And when I say who you are, I mean, like, what do you like to do, that kind of stuff outside of the MMA world.
Well, I mean, I was born and raised in Washougal. All my family's from Washougal. I love Washougal. So I started wrestling when I was young, and then so that kind of made an easy transition I started off in Jujitsu. It was my senior project for high school.
Oh, really?
And so that kind of got me the exposure to it, especially back then. So I graduated in 2005. And so that got me my exposure. And at that time, MMA was just in baby format, essentially. So I got an easy exposure into that, and I was just like, right off the bat, I was just addicted to it. And then I started off with some awesome coaches. I still train with a bunch of them down at Universal in Camas, and down there with Mel Locke, and he's a great person. And so he's really helped bring me up with a good mentality with it. And then I started fighting in 2007, and I've had the pleasure of training with a lot of top people from the area and growing up with all them. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. And so was there one, one moment that made you decide that you wanted to start fighting, or was it just the jiu-jitsu and with the addition of the wrestling experience that you had?
That's tough. So basically my first cage fight was my first fight ever. There was no street fights. That's not how I was raised, so I actually never even told my mom about my first two fights.
Are you kidding me?
No, yeah.
Really?
She would freak out during my wrestling matches in high school. She would she wouldn't be allowed in the gym aspect. She'd be looking through the windows and stuff, and she'd hang out with the ticket lady, and yeah, she's just a great lady. Just cares so much, not one specific moment, right? So I started training jiu-jitsu, and then I saw that Mel was offering kickboxing. And at that time with Universal, they had a decent MMA program. Mm-hmm. There were some awesome guys like Justin Nelson and stuff, and just watching them just do stand-up sparring and everything, I was just like, wow, that's freaking awesome. And then I just started getting addicted to just watching UFCs, and so I'd go down to Blockbuster, rent them all, and
you said Blockbuster.
Blockbuster, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's old school.
Now
right
you're
there.
old too.
Yeah. Oh, seriously. And so I was just intrigued by it, and I just loved it, and I loved wrestling, and so that made the transition so easy with it, and able to use my wrestling, and so I just love the sport aspect of it. A lot of people look at MMA as a whole, and then they think that, it's almost back in the day, it was really categorized as an inhumane sport. When you actually look at it and the beauty of it, there's a lot involved with it, and just the different forms of it. You can't be one-dimensional anymore. No. You can't just be a wrestler, jiu-jitsu, or even stand-up. You just have to be so well-rounded, and that's what I love about it. It's an addicting sport to me. So I don't know if it's just chasing that high of there's no crazy feeling like being pulled off of a guy in a cage and getting paid to do that. I mean, it's just an amazing feeling.
That I can only imagine. I've never done anything near that, but we all get, our kicks, a certain way, as long as it's not heroin.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that.
It's healthy.
That's how I am with this. But you brought Mel's name up, and so that kind of leads me into my next question. Do you have one person that you look to for inspiration in terms of your MMA career, or has it been kind of a group effort, or do you have a mentor or anything like that?
Well, so I was just raised by my mom and essentially like my grandpa. So I've always been blessed with awesome father figures. So when I was in high school, I had John Carver and Rob Anderson with the high school wrestling, and they were a huge influence of who I am today. And once I graduated and I started going to Jiu-Jitsu, Mel Locke was the next one up with that. And great role model, great person, and I've been a part of a few great gyms. Right now I'm a part of Gracie Baja in Portland. Our head coach is Fabiano Scherner, and he's a great role model in that aspect as well. I mean, he's won so many world titles with like Jiu-Jitsu. He was in the UFC for a long time. And he's just a great person too. So I've been really blessed with the people I've surrounded myself with. I've always been pretty decent about reading people, so I don't really get involved with gyms where they have shady coaches and stuff like that. That's just not who I am, and that's not who I want to learn from. And I always ask Mel's opinion at the end of the day too. So because he knows it, at our gym, he's able to offer a decent amount, but especially with MMA these days, you need to be able to be surrounded by sharks, essentially. Yeah. And so I always ask his opinion on the gyms that I'm going to be going to, so that helps out a lot, too.
You talk about the shady side of the sport, and, we always kind of go back to boxing and the shady underbelly that is pretty much that entire sport. Do you see quite a bit of that in MMA?
Yes and no. I mean, we've seen it, and I'm definitely not going to name gyms or people, of course, but we definitely see it. I don't think it's as apparent as boxing. It could just be because, boxing has been around for so much longer that, it's starting to come out a lot more, the politics involved and the shadiness of some of those fights, like the Triple G Canelo fight. Like a lot of controversy there.
Oh, boy.
And that's just one aspect of it. A lot of Mayweather fights, a lot of controversy with it. But for the most part, not too much. You'll see shady promotions, and it could just be the Northwest is what I consider a little bit behind the times with some of it. Like California, East Coast is a little bit more advanced with like the MMA scene. They just have a lot more promotions around. We're growing a lot, and it's grown a lot in just say the last 5 years with that. But yeah, you definitely, in any sport, you're going to run across your shady characters.
Whenever there's money involved, I can imagine
exactly.
it attracts the shady folks. So kind of what led me to bringing you on is when I ran across you at Safeway. And one of the things that we talked about was that, a while back you suffered an injury, and you've recovered from that and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about the injury to begin with and how you sustained it?
Yeah, so basically what happened in my last fight, in my pro debut, so I went 11-4 as an amateur, and then all my coaches felt like it was the right time to make my pro debut. So they selected a great opponent for me, somebody that I was just slated to do very well against. And we watched some of his tapes ahead of time, and we knew that he came out with some high kicks. And so a game plan was just bite down the mouthpiece, cover, and throw a straight left down the pipe, or get a takedown, whatever it may be. And so he came out with a left high kick. I covered with my right, threw a straight left down the pipe, and he ended up dropping. And my initial reaction, I should have just followed up with punches, but my initial reaction was to go for a topside choke. Once I started to go for that topside choke, I realized my right arm wasn't working. And so when you're in that kind of oh shoot moment, and you have so much adrenaline going, it's not like you feel pain whatsoever. And so I was just kind of hoping like, oh man, maybe it's just a stinger. And so I was kind of like trying to shake it out. And he was starting to come to and reverse the position, and was trying to push off, and it just wasn't working. And he ended up locking up the sub, and ended up getting the tap. And I knew my arm was something was wrong. And so basically we went to the emergency room that night, and I suffered what they call a olecranon fracture. So basically where your two bones in your arm meet up, right off that elbow joint, it was a clean break right across. So it basically just think of your elbow coming completely off.
Yeah.
And so I got lucky it wasn't shattered, but basically when I blocked that high kick, those two contact forces just split it. And so, yeah, it was a pretty gnarly injury. And when the tech or whatever came in and showed me the x-ray, I was just shaking my head. I was like, you gotta be kidding me, man. And yeah, so luckily, I mean, it was tough. It was definitely tough because I was really rising in the ranks, and everybody was super excited. I had a lot of sponsors behind me, a lot of push. And so that was a huge setback, not just in my career, but life, everything. And so, yes, it required 2 surgeries. First surgery they did was they put a plate and 4 screws on it to essentially reconnect the elbow to it. And then from there, about like 6 months into it. And so with that, I was really blessed too. So one of my sponsors ahead of time was Lindsay Poliska down at Therapeutic Associates of Camas. If anybody gets injured, go through her. She's awesome. Helped me out a lot with it. And so about 6 months into it, or a little bit into it, we realized, okay, my body wasn't really liking the metal that they had used. And so, which was the case. And we kind of knew that ahead of time. I was kind of hoping that it was going to stay in, so when I threw elbows later on, I could just hit people with a plate to the face.
Yes.
You know?
Wow.
But
taking it up a notch, Jess.
Do what you can. And so yeah, that wasn't the case. And so then we had a problem with, we were going through the promoter's insurance company, and so we were having problems with that in the hospital. Nobody really wanted to pay, and my very lack thereof insurance, I had a really garbage insurance at the time, and so nobody really wanted to pay. And so instead of getting it out in about 6 months, which was about optimal, it didn't come out until about 10 months after.
Ooh.
And so during that 4 months of excess time, I guess, my body had developed excess scar tissue, and where the screws were at, there was a bone infections. And so basically, like, every day I was having to do my own cleaning of it. Just for everybody out there, there was basically pus coming out of every of those holes, and so you're just having to keep it clean all the time. And so that was rough. And then they took it out. Had an awesome surgeon out of Rebound, Dr. Kevin Kahn, amazing guy. He really helped me out a lot. And so he did a great job with the second surgery and the first. And so once it all got out of there, everything was golden. But then that was basically almost a year after this had happened. So right arm was severely weak. And so then it was just started the rehab process. And very fortunate. I mean, looking back on it, I mean, like, how much infection I dealt with. I mean, I really could have lost my arm. Yeah, so
could have gone septic and been in big trouble.
Exactly. So luckily I kept on it. My mom has been in the health industry for a long time, and so she was pretty hardcore about it. Yeah, and so very fortunate I didn't lose my arm. And then, yeah, it was just hard. And so basically after the year, so this happened in December of 2015. So we're coming up on like the 3-year anniversary of it. And so first year, just nothing. I mean, all I could do was movement training, one-arm jiu-jitsu, and barely much. But the big thing that I took out of that is just keeping a positive attitude with it. I feel like a lot of people, when they're put in those type of situations, they'll look at all the negative, like, oh man, this sucks, I can't do anything. I basically looked at it from the aspect of, okay, so like in my regular training, I wasn't doing enough movement training, you know, just staying light on my feet, cutting angles, doing different things along those aspects. So I just started working that. My legs are the strongest they've ever been, so I started working those. And so I just focused on different aspects of it. And down at Universal, everybody there was super nice, and I was able to do like one-arm jiu-jitsu. They're like, oh, hey, don't touch his right arm or you're a horrible person. You know? So like So with that, you know, it was pretty cool, and so you just gotta shift your mind frame with it, and that's the thing that really helped me get through it. And what helped my rehab, Lindsay was awesome, and then once I got the plate and screws out, it was a go time basically, and so I just started hammering all my rehab and just getting it stronger. And luckily, I work at a gym, All Pride Fitness in Washougal, so I'm around all the bands, all the weights, everything that I'm able to do. Of course, there was definite times where I pushed it a little bit too much, running when I wasn't supposed to, where I thought like, oh, the screws were coming out, like it hurt
Really?
so bad, like there was a lot of like sleepless nights, but yeah, it created a new mind frame for me, and realizing that, hey, you're not invincible. And so yeah.
How much of the sport do you think is mindset?
At least I would say 100%. I mean, there's just so much to it, and that's the crazy shift that I've been able to do. Let's say like the last like 6 months, I'm around great people. So I personal train for the general population, and that's a big thing that I've always like pushed, is not just like the physical aspect of fitness, exercise, whatever it may be, is the mental aspect of it. And so like the last 6 months or last couple of years, I've been doing strength and conditioning for more like MMA fighters, and so combat sports, whatever it may be. And I'm surrounded by awesome people. And so one of my first MMA guys, Ricky Simone, so he just made his UFC debut in April, and that kid, the kid's a freak, but he's kind of shifted my mindset. Just by being around him, you realize like it's not having a cocky attitude, it's having a confidence attitude. Having faith in what you do, because I mean, we work out probably about 3 times a day, and so 6 days a week, and there's so much that goes into it that you have to have faith in yourself. I mean, if you don't think that you can run through any grown man on this planet, then you shouldn't be in this sport.
That's an incredible thing. So all told, are we 2 years that's taken you to recover from this injury?
So it'll be 3 years in December. So, but the big thing that happened with it, so I had a year off almost completely of what I would say my daily activities, you know, just shifting and doing different type of workouts. Then I had a year of recovery, and then to get me back up to what I consider like fighting speed, you know. Mm-hmm. So this year, is just been a killer year. I've had a couple like personal things come up, but from my mindset coming out of this injury, I'm not really fazed by too much these days. I have a really positive outlook on life. I keep saying the word blessed, but I mean, I really believe it, man. Like, I've worked a lot of like 9-to-5 jobs, and I finally find something that I love to do, and every day I'm living and breathing, you know, so it's good, you know. So I just try to tackle every day and just give it everything I got. So
when you're coaching these other fighters, and I've seen you've been part of some staffs or teams of coaches, you really try to bring that mindset of you can overcome or not maybe run through a wall, but really focus and get those guys to understand how important that mindset is because of your experiences?
Definitely, you know, and it's little things that you just say to them. It's not like sitting them down and trying to
Tony Robbins them and all that.
Yeah, it's not even that. It's just planting these little seeds and, like, you know, just telling them just random things. You know, one of the best books I've ever read was Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew, and he's all about the art of buying into your people, whatever type of athletics it may be. You'll see that with football players, baseball players. It doesn't really matter. But I really took a lot from that book by itself. And I do listen to a lot of motivational speakers. Tony Robbins is great. There's a lot of good guys out there. Even Gary Vee's great. Mm-hmm. You know, Eric Thomas is one of my favorite too. There's a lot of great guys out there. And I've always just taken like little things from it to just plant those seeds in their minds. Because, I mean, sure, I have a couple UFC guys, but then I also have a couple lower pros, amateur fighters that need those seeds planted in to be able to realize that, hey, man, you're putting in this killer work, just shifting that brain just a little bit and just realizing that that guy across that cage is just another man, and you just put in way more work than he did, and so let's
get after it. And so when you are getting ready for a fight, let's take the injury out of the equation. If you book a fight today, what is the optimal time that you're going to put in, or that you would like to put in before that fight occurs?
For myself, it's right about 6 weeks. There's a lot of people that do 8-week camps. Maybe if you're going for a pro world title, you might want to go 8. But if you're a professional fighter, you should be in the gym almost every day. So you should be able to take a fight on a couple weeks' notice.
Really?
You know, I firmly believe that if I had to fight this weekend, I can easily go 3 fights. My cardio, my conditioning's on point. I mean, it would be a little bit rough, and you would just have to deal with like a sort of adrenaline dump with it, because you would be second-guessing some things. But 6 weeks is optimal for it.
Do you do much, you know, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, do you do much studying of your opponent in terms of, you know, you watch videos of the opponent in the fight that you were injured? Is that something that you put a lot of time and effort into in terms of studying them, or do you really focus internally on what you're going to do in that fight?
More internally. So like if you're looking at percentages, definitely more internal type things, because it's all about implementing my game plan. Because if I just watch his videos and just react to what he's doing, I'm not doing what I want to do. You know, whether it be get it down to the ground or stand and bang with him. And so we have awesome coaches, from boxing coaches, kickboxing coaches, all around head coaches, and jiu-jitsu coaches as well. And so they do a good job of looking at it and being like, okay, so we can see he's got kind of a weak jab, but you have to watch out for that straight right. Or that thing stings, or that right drops a little bit when he's throwing that jab, so maybe parry and throw a left high. So you just got to look at, so we get good feedback from our coaches, but every once in a while I'll go through and I'll look at least a few videos as I get closer to it, but definitely more internal work.
And I can totally see that. And you don't want to psych yourself out by totally overanalyzing your opponent and what may be their strengths. It's all about what your strength is, I can imagine, going into that fight. And kind of leading into that, if you had to characterize yourself as one, what is your strongest part of your tool chest when it comes to a fight? What kind of fighter are you known for? If somebody asks, who is Jess Moore, another guy's going to say you are this type of fighter.
I would say jiu-jitsu, definitely. I mean, I love choking people, and it sounds dumb like the random person, you know, like I don't like choking random people, but to me, jiu-jitsu is a beautiful thing. I'm looking to do the World Championships down in Anaheim, December 15th, and so I'm about to start a camp for that, and then hopefully a fight pops up around that time. But, you know, once I push fighting to the side, focus on my people and myself, will be just jiu-jitsu. But my problem is, too, people would categorize me as tough, too, because sometimes I just stay in the pocket and I just throw when my coaches are yelling at me, just move, you know, so, and I should just take them down, but I get a little stubborn sometimes, and I just like to punch people in the face. But,
we've got punching people in the face and choking people. I'm not going to mess with you. I mean, I wasn't going to in the first place, but that'd probably be a bad idea, right?
No, it's like I said, jiu-jitsu is a beautiful thing for me. So, like I think how we talked about earlier, everybody has their thing, you know, whether it be running or podcast, you know, it just kind of puts you in your element. Say like today, for example, we had noon no-gi practice. No-gi refers to like you just wear shorts and
I was going to ask you that. Are you no-gi or no-gi? What would you prefer?
So if I have a fight coming up, I like no-gi just from MMA aspects of it. I'm a little bit more comfortable there, but I really do love the gi. There's so many more. It's a different world. they're both the same sport essentially, but different worlds, and so they're fun to play around with. With the gi, you have so many more handles, and so you have more options for different things. Like I said, just for example, I like to choke people, so my choke game is very strong. I have so many different variations that I can hit you from different positions. And so with the gi, I'm able to add more tools to that tool belt, or more avenues from, just say, like turtle position, back control, side mount, whatever it may be. I have a couple different options using your lapel or my own. So I like it. And yeah, jiu-jitsu is just a beautiful thing. I lift weights, I run. Nothing gives me that release like that does. It's just crazy. At the end of the day, I really felt like, it's not like saved my life, but it's helped me out so much.
And I hear that a lot from guys that do jiu-jitsu. I listen to several podcasts that have, it's not so much that it's jiu-jitsu oriented, but they're big into, whether it's Joe Rogan or Jocko Willink, they always talk about how big a part of their life jiu-jitsu is. And it almost seems as if it's more off the mat or outside of fighting, or in a jiu-jitsu match or whatever it may be, the mindset and the calmness that it can bring about for them. Is that something that you share with them, you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's just crazy. It changes your mindset. When life likes to throw you like little obstacles, we all get thrown with it.
No, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely not a perfect world we live in. So when those things I'm approached with those things, my mindset's completely different. I feel like, just because I'm able to analyze the situation a little bit more correctly and a little bit more set back with it. Because I mean, the big thing with jiu-jitsu, it's just a physical chess game, and so your mind's always going. And so definitely with that, I mean, it's helped me out. I mean, there's been a few instances, like just around this community. I mean, I've ran down different types of like purse thieves and stuff just at work. They'll be cruising through the parking lot. I've helped the local police department just running them down. And that's something that like my grandpa always gave me a hard time for when he was alive. He was like, "Why are you doing that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just have fun with it. Like, I see them running, so I just chase them down and I tackle them and I hold them there till the police get there." I don't think, I'm not really scared when I go into those situations, and that doesn't mean that I'm an aggressive individual. It's just, I like to help people, so.
That's what it boils down to.
You got a quick question for you. You'd mentioned a minute ago, during a fight, your coach is yelling at you to move or whatever. When you're in the middle of a fight and you're so laser focused, do you find yourself having trouble hearing coaches? Are you so honed in that you kind of block everything out? I'm sure you obviously have to make a conscious effort to try to listen for what they're telling you to do, but do you find that hard, trying to focus on your task at hand and also receive input at the same time?
Yes and no. It depends on where you're at in the cage. I mean, bigger cages, if you're on the other side from your coach, it's a little bit harder. But being around them, your brain does a weird thing. It's able to hone in on those voices pretty well. When they're screaming, then they're screaming. Most of them always lose their voice, right after the fight, and you feel bad. But you can hear them for the most part. Every once in a while, like I said, if you're on the other side of the cage, it's a little bit harder. That's why you'll see some guys, if they hit like a takedown, maybe they'll double leg them and carry them all the way to their side of the cage, really? Just so that they're right in their corner, and so their coaches are right there giving them step-by-step instruction.
Just a quick follow-up. Do your coaches use nonverbal communication, like hand signals or anything, in an instance where you can't hear them telling you something? Are there ever any nonverbal cues they give you at all?
No, that's too difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're focusing on the fight and their location, so basically they're right almost like below the cage. Like, all you can see is like their head popping up, essentially, floating. Because the cage is actually like an elevated surface, in an arena or wherever it is. And so that's just a little bit too much. And so, yeah, they're just there screaming, essentially.
Cool.
You were talking a little bit earlier about the Northwest being maybe a little bit behind the times in the overall MMA world. Do you think that if we're going to get a little hyper local, that Vancouver, this area is up and coming, it's a strong place for somebody to begin a career like yourself, or what would be maybe a downfall of this area if there is one, if you were going to talk to somebody that wanted to get into the sport?
I feel like there's a lot of good gyms around the area, from beginner to Portland right now has a lot of great gyms.
Matt Lindland, those guys?
Team Quest has always been a staple part of the MMA community in this area. I mean, they're one of the pioneers when they had Randy, Matt Lindland, everybody. A lot of those guys have kind of tailored off, and that's why I feel like, honestly, I'm a little bit biased, but Gracie Barra is the best place to train in this area. If you are a top-level MMA fighter right now and you live in this area, you will be training at Gracie Barra. If not, then you're going to be a little bit behind. I don't believe that it necessarily hinders you staying in this area. It just all depends on what you work well with. I love this area. I've contemplated moving a bunch of times, lived in San Diego for a little bit, and I did my training there, but I love this area. And so sometimes when we do camps, and say if we start a fight camp, then maybe we'll go and start our camp in an affiliate gym or someplace that you're comfortable with, where there's just a little bit more plethora of guys. Like California has a lot of good gyms and a lot of variety to choose from. Hawaii does too, if you're going to stay with essentially West Coast. Denver's growing with a lot of big gyms.
Really?
But yeah, it's all about what works best for you. Because like I said, we have great coaches down at Gracie Barra. Like Andy Mintzker's our boxing coach. He's amazing coach. And then we have great kickboxing there as well. So,
is this sport expensive to get into?
It's not like golf or something like that. Golf to me is this ridiculous thing that
I second that motion.
No, I love golf. I play golf. I've always done it the blue collar way, essentially, but
you're the Happy Gilmore of golf.
Pretty much, yeah. I've tailored all my clubs to fit me. My grandpa showed me how to do that, resize the shafts, everything like that. Luckily, being smaller, any hand-me-downs were always bigger, so it was easier to do. But MMA, or getting into it, it's not what I would consider extremely expensive. It's just prioritizing your life. So, what I would consider the average gym dues is probably right around $100. Okay. It could go a little bit higher, it can go a little bit lower, just depending on the facility. And if you actually look at those facilities, they have a lot of things that you need, from conditioning aspects to all your classes are involved with it, and then usually they'll help you out with some gear. In the beginning, you don't need much. You really don't. Maybe some 16-ounce gloves. Make sure you get your hand wraps, and then you'll slowly get your sparring gear. Gis are what I consider a little bit more expensive, but again, it's just prioritizing. I always see some guys, not at the place I train with now, but in the past I've seen guys complain about not being able to pay their dues, and I can understand that. I mean, I didn't grow up with money, so I can understand that. But you also see those guys at the bar or something, and you're like, well, you just bought people
you're
drinks.
Prioritizing, exactly.
So you're like, well, come on, man. So where it falls out in your life, I feel like you can make things happen. I don't survive off much. Most of my money goes towards proper nutrition and gas to get to training, so, and that's what makes me happy. So I'm all good, and
that's what's important in life. I mean, if it makes you happy, that's what it's about, right? I mean, and so many people miss out on that because they're just chasing somebody else's dream, the Joneses or something like that. So, if we had to look at MMA right now, I think the last fight that we saw with Connor and I can't pronounce his name.
Khabib.
Khabib. it kind of had a WWE aspect to it in terms of the sideshow to everything. How do you think that hinders or helps the sport of MMA in terms of the general population? Do you think what do you think of that? Just in general, what's your take on it?
I'm back and forth on it. It's tough. So I watched that, not essentially live, but I watched that fight. And so leading up into the fight, I really like Conor McGregor. I think he's actually great for the sport. I mean, he's brought so much more money into it. There's still so much money in boxing. To me, it's ridiculous how much there is in that compared to MMA these days.
I agree with that.
But the antics afterwards, I don't think that they should have gone as well or as far as they did. Just because, I mean, bad stuff happened. But you also look at the aspect of, too, I felt like it was over-highlighted because Conor McGregor's done that twice going up into this fight. Jumped out of the cage, went to go try to fight somebody out in the stands. Khabib was just more successful with it. And all of his friends afterwards. And you also got to look at, like, the two people that nationalities essentially you really don't want to piss off are the Russians and the Irish. I mean,
I agree with that.
So there's that bad blood right there. And Khabib, you know, he's a tough Russian guy, you know, so yeah.
And it's
tough.
I don't think it's necessarily a big negative in that, you know, they say that any promotion or coverage can be good coverage in the way that it's spun. It boils down to the way that SportsCenter presents it to everyone, and the everyday Joe may not like that. And whether it's on the female side or the male side, they may say, well, this is a good... Well, to some degree, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if I'm a big fan of jumping out and beating up people in the outside of the cage, but I think Conor's great for the sport, and in that he's exciting. I mean, he united a nation and in Ireland, and it's not just somebody that's, you know, all about their chi or something like that and in tune with himself. He's out there. He's confident. And I think that some of it may be a show for his fans and things like that. But I ultimately think it can be a good thing as long as it's focused, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
No, totally. Yeah, I wasn't too big of a fan watching it. And then, I mean, one of Khabib's guys jumped behind Conor when he wasn't looking and sucker punched him.
Yeah.
All this mayhem, and then it caused, if you look at it too, I mean, there's mayhem on the streets of Vegas.
Oh.
A different type of regular mayhem in Vegas, I guess. Because, I mean, you just had so many drunk people afterwards just causing fights and all this aftermath, essentially.
Everywhere you go. I mean, Wes and I were at the casino the night of that fight, and there were 3 fights up there, one of them inside the viewing area, one of them in the bar that's in the middle of the casino, and then one in the high roller room. And I've been at Chinook Winds when they've had MMA events, and it's like you have the fighters and they're controlled chaos, and then you got all these knuckleheads in affliction shirts who think that they're MMA fighters, and they're not. And they're out there raising all hell, and that's, I think, the worst look for it is all the goofballs out there doing dumb shit because they're drunk.
Yeah.
That I don't like. I mean, Wes and I saw it. It was a potpourri of folks that were going in to watch that fight.
All walks of life. That was some interesting folks.
We had some fun with their expenses. We were walking in, but it was it definitely draws a lot of different people, and I think that's a good thing. And it's just alcohol usually causes problems when you have all those types of people together. We don't have to belabor that point. As somebody who has seen people come in and out of the sport, because you've been involved for so long, if Joe Schmo comes up to you and asks what type of person is cut out for MMA, what would be your answer to that? Is there a type of person? I mean, what is the makeup of an MMA fighter? What should it look like?
Oh, man.
Just starting, not having gone through it or anything like that.
I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but I initially would ask them if they ever wrestled before, because I feel like if you look at the majority of fighters, if you have a wrestling background, you know what it takes to be a fighter, essentially. And it's just a strong individual, you know, mentally and physically, more mentally than anything, because a lot of people don't really understand what it takes to be a fighter. Putting in a 6-week camp is a grueling aspect of it. I feel like that's one thing that's helping essentially my business and what I do right now for MMA fighters in strength and conditioning, is because there's not a lot of strength and conditioning coaches out there that have that background in MMA, and they know how to structure things accordingly. So, and not simple things, but one of the worst parts about fighting is cutting weight. And so we're lucky and we only do it one time, you know, possibly throughout the year. Maybe you'll do it probably about like 4 times, let's say. If you're an active fighter, you'll fight 4 times, you know, every 3 months, let's say. So you learn a lot about somebody when they have to cut 15 pounds in a day. And so I would just talk with them and see what kind of mentally strong person they are as an individual, and see if they have what it takes. And you just really just never know. I mean, I've ran across a bunch of guys that you're like, man, you seem like you're great, but then, you know, then maybe you go cut weight with them or you train with them, and then halfway through a training cycle, later in the rounds, they break. You know, we see that all the time. People that look physically strong are just mentally weak. You know, they have the cardio for it, but you put the pressure on them and they just wilt. And so that's a big thing that's helped me throughout it, is just having this thing where it's like, you know, I don't want to be held down. It's like, screw you, I'm going to be getting up. Like, so that's a big thing that I would try to analyze, essentially, which is a tough thing. And so,
but again, it boils down to mentality.
Yeah.
It's physicality can be purchased and can be made through weightlifting and cardiovascular work. You can't purchase toughness in the mind. I mean, that's something that you've got to build.
Just to dovetail on his question, all things being equal, if he had 3 different guys, one guy who had a background in wrestling, one in Jujitsu, and one in boxing, would you say the guy with the wrestling background that would be the best foundation to start with? In terms of the disciplines?
I'm a little bit biased with it, but just from my longevity in the sport, and you look at the statistics and the numbers with that wrestlers have, and you look at most of all the champions that are in the UFC right now. I mean, just starting off with like Henry Cejudo. I mean, he was a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, and then you go to 135, and you got T.J. Dillashaw, who wrestled for University of California. I could be wrong with that, but anyways, or Minnesota. Anyways, so if you go through most of the weight classes, wrestlers kind of overtake it. But then you got people like Conor McGregor or like a George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre grew up doing a form of like almost like karate, and then he was such a great martial artist that he tried out for the Canadian Olympic team, and I'm pretty sure he almost made it. And so it depends on the individual, but I would put my money on the wrestler.
Okay.
We'll wrap up the interview with this question, and it's just one that I thought of off the top of my head. And maybe you don't want to answer it because of your career. What do you think of Dana White? And the fact that one man controls so much of the professional side of the sport.
I almost think it's good. You know, from knowing people that have dealt with Dana, I feel like he's good for the sport, and you just look for what that one man has done from the sport, from a sport that was going to die.
Oh,
UFC was going to die, and then him and the Fertitta brothers brought it to life. And if you actually look at it, you don't want too many hands in the pot when you're dealing with something big like the UFC. So having him undertake most of all that is possibly a great thing. And if you look at the stress that he goes through, the guy makes a ridiculous amount of money. He has probably one of the best jobs there is, in my opinion. But, like, there's a high stress with that is involved, too. He's always at these events. And so...
What about the money aspect of it and the way they control that? Because I think that UFC fighters are vastly underpaid compared to, like you said earlier, boxing. I think that the money is there in pay-per-views. It may not be as big as McGregor Mayweather was, but I think that they are vastly underpaid, especially considering the amount of work that goes into it and the punishment that they take.
Oh, I agree 100% with that. I mean, I vastly underpaid. I feel like they should. And one thing with that, too, I mean, if anybody that knows the sport, especially with UFC, once they signed with Reebok, they basically made it so that you couldn't showcase your sponsors. So you couldn't wear, Kinetic Chaos Podcast, logo on your shorts, whatever it may be. And so that, especially in the beginning, I think it's gotten a little bit better with the Reebok payouts and everything, but definitely it's not what people are making, what they were making. I mean, I know a lot of people just off sponsors that were making $100K just off sponsors for a fight. And then so you take that out. Now, I mean, there's a lot of avenues that you can attack it from nowadays. I mean, social media is huge, but a lot of companies want to see their logo out there.
Absolutely.
There's a huge thing when you're fighting in the MGM Grand. You want to look at their logos either on the shorts or their posters and be like, okay, I see Kinetic Chaos Podcast right there. I'll give you a few grand, So that's a big thing that I don't think that they really took the fighter. They valued the fighter that much when they took that away from it. And so that kind of made me sad with it, especially with like the UFC with that. And that's why a lot of people jumped ships and went to Bellator and some other promotions just so that they can get paid. But
I know I said it was the last question, and Wes knows that whenever I say that, we're no
Well,
longer
I
the
had
last
I
question.
had a follow up too. 'Cause
Absolutely.
as I told you before we went on air, that I'm a total MMA novice, but I didn't know that. So there is no individual sponsorship opportunities anymore. I mean, Reebok basically took over, so individual fighters can't have their own sponsors.
So you can. So it's a tough thing. So basically, you can have your own individual sponsors. So just take, I know a few UFC guys that are sponsored by some real estate companies or whatever it may be, especially, say, if they're from the area, there's still some community involvement with that. And then so they'll be able to still plug them through. Mainstream is social media.
They just can't visually display anything.
Yeah, if you're at a UFC
sponsor-wise.
event,
Gotcha.
whether it be, a press conference, whatever it is, you're wearing Reebok gear, UFC gear, that's it.
Okay.
You're not even wearing Nike shoes, Nike socks, like you are wearing Reebok, that's
Wow.
it.
What
So,
about it in Bellator? Could you wear your own sponsors in Bellator?
Yeah, you can wear whatever you want.
Okay. So, I mean, that kind of paints that picture that they have a complete monopoly on what you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us an idea of maybe not what the main event, the Conor McGregors, the GSPs, those guys are making, but if you're on the undercard, still televised in a fight at UFC, do you have any idea what those guys are making for a fight? Just to paint the picture for the listeners and the viewers.
So what a lot of people don't realize too with MMA, so like a lot of people know boxing. Boxing, you get one purse.
Mm-hmm.
So like whether you get the crap beat out of you or you win, whatever, you get that one purse. The contract's already signed with that. So say like UFC, I know some guys that made their debut and there's been as low as like $5,000 to show, $5,000 to win, and then you also get the Reebok deal on top of that. And so you could be walking away with, let's say, like $15K just from if you win that fight.
But you have to win. You don't get paid if you lose. You're not going to get that aspect of it.
You won't get you won't get your win purse, that win value. You'll get the $5K to show, and then the Reebok sponsorship.
Wow, that's a hell of a premium. To
Exactly. I mean, that's why, especially in the beginning, some guys were actually that are full-time fighters. Like, this is what you do. Like, that's your job. They were getting part-time jobs just to, pay the bills. At the end of the day. But I've also seen guys, walk into the UFC and get paid 10 to show, 10 to win, and then it goes up from there with your experience with it, and it depends on what card you're on too. But even some guys, I know some guys that have been in it for a long time, and like, you know, they've had some bumps in their career, and maybe like they've won a bunch and then they lost, and then they won and then they lost. You know, they're still not making what I consider what they should be, because, you know, they are one of the prime people that have been with the UFC for so long. But yeah, there's the money there is just kind of ridiculous, and I don't think a lot of people, when they watch fighting and they see it on pay-per-view and they see, you know, they just shelled out $60 or whatever it may be to watch that pay-per-view event, they think that, like, oh, these fighters should be putting it all on the line, and they should. It's an entertainment sport, but they're not getting paid that much. You know, when it comes down to what you're putting your body through.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the last fights I watched, not on the Conor one before that, I mean, this guy's knee got freaking broke from a knee bar, and you're like, well, that guy's going to be out for at least a year and possibly not even be able to return, you know. And so a lot of people, and he only got half of his purse because he just lost. So a lot of people don't even take that into consideration as a spectator. You know, they just think like, oh, go in and beat them up, and you're like, well, these are people, you know, like, there's not that much money on the line, you know, with it.
They're doing it for the love, really. I mean, unless
you're
a Conor or somebody like that, you're doing it for the love of the sport and for what you want to do.
Exactly, and that's a big reason why, you know, I'm getting back into fighting, is not just for like, oh, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make millions of dollars. It's like something I love to do, and I'm all about that redemption. So my last fight, I broke my arm, and so the average person would be like, okay, you know, I just hit 31 years old, and so your average 31-year-old should not be in as good a shape as I am right now. You know, let's just say that. And so they say, even a lot of my close friends are like, well, hey, man, you had a great career. Just put it to the side and focus on your other career. And that's just not who I am as an individual. And so I all about that love, you know. And so some people might call me crazy. I don't really care, because it's like I know that next fight that I go in there, I'm going to smash somebody, you know. And so that's what I'm just striving for right now. So
do you have a next fight yet?
Not yet. We were hoping to get on the Prime card. They offered me a weight class up, and so hopefully something soon. You know, I'm going to do the World Championships December 15th, and then hopefully with the team I'm associated with, they have so many great connections, and they see the hard work that I put in there, and so they know they're on the same page with me that find me a guy at 135 and I'll just smash him. So let's get something scheduled. Hopefully it'll be somewhere local, because being born and raised in Washougal, I have a lot of love and support in the area, and a lot of support, and I'm very blessed with that. Washougal usually sells the show out, and so I would like to keep it local, but I mean, if I gotta fly out, then it's cool.
Well, we'd love to continue to support you. I mean, we'd love to have you back on and talk about your next fight. And I've got, because I think, you know, it's even for our audience, this may not be our core thing, but I think it's really important above and beyond the fighting. It's the perseverance, the lessons that you can teach us about ourselves and overcoming that adversity and things like that. I really think you got a really strong career as a coach, probably, but as a motivational speaker, absolutely. I can definitely see you up there motivating people. Wes, do you have anything?
I got nothing. Just thanks for coming on. It's been awesome.
Oh, I really appreciate you guys. I mean,
do you have anything that you want to say? Anyone that you want to shout out or anything like that?
I don't really know about that. I mean, I thank you guys. I mean, personally, I mean, it's really nice to be able to. This really helps get my name back out there, and people are like, okay, absolutely. Jess is looking to fight again. All of my close people know that, like, you know, I'm going to be fighting here pretty soon, but I have so many awesome people around me down at Gracie Baja, Universal, even down at my job, down at All Pride Fitness. You know, my boss is awesome with working around my schedule and allowing me to work with MMA guys, because, I mean, not a lot of the gyms want that in their facility. You know, that's totally different than your average workout facility, you know. But,
Absolutely.
you know, him being able to allow me to do that has really helped, you know, develop that passion for working with MMA athletes. And so finding your niche in life is a huge thing. And so that's why, you know, that fire is just burning right now. So I feel very blessed with that. And I have awesome support. My mom's a great lady, so I love her. So, yeah, that's basically it.
That's awesome. Well, like I said, we're going to bring you back again
Sweet.
because as soon as you get a fight, I'd like to dig into a little bit more about, you know, what it takes to, we covered a little bit, but I think there's more that we can get out of you and help to spread the word for your next fight. Like I said, you know, like you said, I hope it's local so that we can get down there, we can help promote you and support you as much as we can because it's a lot of fun. And if you've ever, Wes isn't as big into the MMA as I'm a novice as well, but I enjoy watching it because I have a lot of respect for you guys. I mean, you do something that a lot of us can't do. We don't have the intestinal fortitude or, you know, whatever it takes to get out there and it's not even, you know, people say, oh, you get out there and get your head beat in. No, BS. It's that mentality that you can get through the training just so that you can step out into the cage. That's what is so impressive to me. So, and you've overcome the injuries and all that. So, I mean, we just love having you on. We appreciate you taking the time to come on, and we'll absolutely continue to promote you and get you on here. I'm going to, afterwards or maybe later, I'm going to get some of the information, the contact information on the folks that you talked about here. So in the show notes that I put out for the show tomorrow, I can include that if anyone has any questions. Why don't you give them your Instagram so that they can follow you or shoot you a question on there? Where can we find you there?
Yeah, definitely come check out my Instagram. That's where I do most of my stuff. It's Jess Moore 135. I have all my own training on there. It's my personal page too, so you got to deal with that as well. But
you were you hiking up there today?
I hiked yesterday. So I did Silver Star yesterday.
That was awesome.
I love hiking. I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't fully embrace what we have around us. You know, I'm guilty about that as well, but man, there's so many killer views, and a lot of my clients have been pushing me to do Silver Star, and so I was finally able to do it yesterday with this killer weather, and so, man, the views were incredible. So
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Anything else, Wes?
No.
Well, this has been Kinetic Chaos Podcast, episode 57. We thank you, Jess Moore, so much. Like I said, in the show notes, we'll have the contact information. We'll have your Instagram in there again and some of the Baja Gracie, am I correct saying that?
Gracie Baja.
Gracie Baja, I'm sorry. And Universal with Mel Lock, downtown Camas. I'll have that stuff in there. So thank you guys for listening and for watching. Facebook, we'll see you guys later. This has been Kinetic Chaos. I already said that, 57. We gone. Facebook, thank you guys for watching. We've had a hell of a crew watching us. We appreciate everyone. We'll have Jess on in the very, very near future. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. That was awesome, man.
Was it?
Hell of a good
Cool,
job, man. You were a killer interview.